Big thanks to the Small Business Development Center for sponsoring The Vault at 201 North Broadway. The SBDC is an incredible resource for small business owners, offering free one-on-one counseling, business plan support, market research, financial projections, and much more. Whether you're just starting out or looking to grow, they're here to help your business succeed. Reach out to us at bigsky.economicdevelopment.org.
Coming into a leadership position, you find the right people, and those other people make everybody else better. And the beautiful thing for me as a leader is there's a huge sense of freedom in that because it's about more than me.
The following is a Big Sky Economic Development production.
It's Mars B.
And Kavo.
And this is The Vault at 201 North Broadway.
A business podcast
where we bring you entrepreneurs, small business owners, and community leaders of Montana.
You don't want to miss this.
Learn how to better start, manage, and grow your business.
And your leadership style.
Tangible takeaways to save you time and improve whatever it is that you're working on.
You're listening to The Vault.
Today, joining us on The Vault is Andrew McDonald with the Billings Catholic Schools. You're the president, so welcome. We're excited to have you joining us on The Vault.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, so Andrew, we know that you've relocated into Billings in the past few years and into the community, but prior to being here, we'd like to start each episode just learning more about our guest and where they grew up, what their upbringing was like, all of those things. So I'll just let you take it from there.
Yeah, so I grew up in Denver, Colorado. Moved there when I was really young from Ann Arbor, Michigan. So,
oh, wow. You're a Michigan resident. Okay.
Have a deep love for the football team up there.
It's like the University of Michigan, right?
Yeah, University of Michigan Wolverines.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So like first experience with football, with, playing catch with my dad was actually on the Michigan football field because they really didn't care about security back then.
Wow, yeah.
And we were a couple blocks from the stadium. And so that's where we used to go and just play catch and walk around.
What a fun memory to have in the memory bank.
Yeah, so it was a good year for being a Michigan fan with them going to the national championship.
Yeah, they did really well, I think, this year. As much as I follow sports, which isn't a ton, but I'm getting better.
Yeah, no, it was super fun. And then when I was young, moved to Denver, Colorado, grew up in Catholic schools in kind of the heart of Denver. So
and what was that like coming from Michigan, where I'm assuming it's a little bit smaller of a town? I assume I haven't been to Ann Arbor, but then coming into Denver, was that did you love it? Was it an adjustment?
Yeah, I mean, as a kid, right, you kind of adapt super easily to wherever your parents are. Mm-hmm. And so that was one of those, I don't really have a whole lot of memories of the adjustment. I just remember that we were in a new place, and that's kind of exciting when you're that young, right? New adventures and new opportunities to learn things. Denver was an awesome place to grow up. It was mid 80s when I got there, and it was not nearly as big as it is today. Mm-hmm. So kind of still had that like small town kind of Western feel, right? Mm-hmm. I remember talking to people about being from Denver, and they would freak out, like, how do you live there? Right? It's snowy all the time, and doesn't everybody just ski everywhere? It's kind of like when I talked about moving to Montana, everybody thought I'd ride a horse to work.
Right, which I think is funny, because people do think that. And I'm like, oh no, we have running things like everybody else.
Yeah. No, it's like a real place.
And Denver has a lot of similarities, I think, weather-wise, where it's it does snow across the state of Colorado, but Denver seems to have the nicer weather like Billings gets. Yep. It does feel like a different kind of city. It doesn't feel like a Chicago or a New York. It feels like a Western city, a Western city.
Yeah, it was one of those places. It never felt like a real city to me, even as a kid, right? Like I wasn't scared to walk through parts of the city.
Yeah.
And then, you go to San Francisco or Chicago, and there are definitely places where you don't go.
Right.
So Denver was an awesome place to grow up. Really enjoyed my childhood there. And then as I got a little bit older, right, I met my wife. I had always promised myself I'm never moving to the suburbs. Mm-hmm. Being
funny that we say those things.
I know, right? Being an inner city kid, like the suburbs were so foreign to me. And of course, she's from the suburbs, and we got married, and within 9 months we were living in the suburbs.
And what a transition. So did you meet and like, did you grow up with siblings? Were you the oldest?
So I am the oldest.
Okay. You give the older sibling energy. I'm an oldest too, so I can sense it.
I appreciate the older siblings. And then I've got, I have a younger sister from my mom and dad's marriage. And then I've got a half brother and half sister on my mom's side, and a half brother and half sister on my dad's side.
Oh, fun.
So there's quite a few of us now. Yeah.
That's a lot of fun. So staying in so you did Denver, you graduated from high school, you went to a Catholic school, right? So, and you're still kind of in that system now, which I can't wait to talk about. But what did you do after high school? Like, what did you want to do? Did you know right away when you graduated, or were you like, I got to figure some stuff out?
Yeah. So this is kind of, it's like my journey to how I got here. And it's interesting in hindsight, you can kind of see the threads that connect all of that.
Yes, I love those. Let's dive into those.
Yeah. I always wanted to be a spy, right? Like that was like what I wanted to do. So I wanted to, grew up on Indiana Jones movies and James Bond, right? And it's
same. I had like the paper that would only like, when you wrote on it, you'd have to have like a certain flashlight to see it.
The invisible ink and all that stuff. Yeah. So I loved those things. So studied history because I felt like I should probably have a good understanding of the world in college. So it was a history major with a sociology minor because I figured I should understand how people think too. Finished my degree, realized that there, really wasn't a whole lot that I could immediately do with a history degree. So went back to school and studied international relations.
Wow. And where were you going to school at? Did you stay in Denver?
So I went to the University of Colorado, Denver.
Okay. How big is that? Just for those listening that maybe aren't familiar because we're from Montana. Like what's that size?
It's a larger school, not nearly as big as Colorado Boulder, because it's kind of the extension campus, but there's 3 different colleges on this campus. So there's the Community College of Denver, there's Metro, and then there's UCD. And so there's 40,000 kids down there at any given time. It covers a big part of the middle of downtown too. So it's right in the heart of downtown Denver. But it gave me a lot of different opportunities to get to know people. Denver's grew into a fairly metropolitan place too. So there were people from all over the world. So had professors from Pakistan, and while doing international relations, right, especially at this time, right, it's in the middle of the war on terror. And so Middle Eastern affairs was a pretty big deal. And so that's really where I leaned in. And I was back in school during the Arab Spring, right? So you had these uprisings in all these Arab countries around the world, these protests for democracy. And I became really fascinated by that. So wrote a thesis on the Muslim Brotherhood as kind of a force for democracy, especially in Egypt. So looking at Islamic groups and how they could potentially help bring about democratic societies.
And did you travel? Was that like a master's program? What was that? Did you travel with that?
Yeah,
major?
So that was a master's program. I throughout that, I worked at the same school that I went to elementary school at because it gave me summers free, right? So I was working during the year. I would do after school care, or I was a classroom assistant in a first grade classroom. Did a lot of reading instruction and things like that. But then all summer, I would have time for internships. So I got to actually, travel a bit, get in with different NGOs, and see some of the world, right? Really kind of expand my horizons in that way. And graduated from UCD, had this new degree, and put a bunch of job applications out there, and eventually was offered a job with the Department of Defense in St. Louis, right? So had just gotten married at this point too, had met my wife. As she was a second grade classroom assistant while I was a first grade classroom assistant. So for a year, we kind of got to know each other there through work. And then she took
it's funny
her
first. How that happens. Yeah.
I know, right? That's you in Austin too, right?
It is. Yeah. We met at work, which I was like, they're like, oh, what about Austin? I'm like, no, I'm not gonna. And then I'm like, oh, here we are married.
Yep. So met her. She got her first teaching job and left. And then right after that, I graduated, received this job offer, and was incredibly excited, right? Like it's all coming together. Like this is my entry into being a spy, right? I'll start as an analyst.
It's it.
Yeah. And here we go, right? So I remember sitting down and celebrating with her. She's in her first year of teaching, so she's just getting into her career. It feels a little challenging to say, okay, I know you just got settled, but now we're going to move, to a place where we know nobody. and we're gonna chase this dream. Went in and told the principal that I was heading out, and she looked at me and she said, "Have you ever thought about teaching?" I was like, "Absolutely not." Like, no,
no, sure
I know that
thanks.
I've worked here, right? But that was to enable me to do this other thing.
Yeah, and have the summers, which is so smart.
Yeah. And she was like, "Well, just think about it. Why don't you pray about it this weekend?" And so I was like, I mean, you've given me a job for the past couple of years, so the least I can do is take a weekend.
Think about it.
But like, no, like I'm not going to teach, especially
not in St. Louis.
Not fifth grade, right? Yeah. And so I went that weekend. I'm not a great fisherman, so I like to go because it just gives me a lot of time to think because there's not a lot else that happens. I've gotten better since moving to Montana, but at that point, really, like it was an exercise in patience.
Was it like fly fishing or normal fishing?
Yeah, I just went and just kind of threw a line into the water. Really didn't even know what I was doing. So like spinner pole, just kind of out there by myself.
I have a fishing story. I'll tell you really quick. I shouldn't, but here I am since you brought it up. The one time I did go fishing out at my cousin's pond, I threw the pole in the pond. So since then I'm like, it's just maybe not for me. It's like awesome. Not the vibe. Yeah. But you're out fishing. Something? No, sure didn't.
Bummer.
Yeah, because I threw the pole in the pond on accident.
My daughter's done that and actually got a fish, which is really embarrassing when you're like struggling to actually fish. She just like hooks the pole into the middle of the thing, and you go grab it out, and there's a fish on the line.
You're like, wow, look at you.
Yeah, especially on a frozen, Princess Elsa pole. Yeah. Great.
Okay, so you're fishing. You're just like calm weekend outside.
Yeah, and really tried to take some time and pray, right, and say, like, God, what do you want from me? And I had my Bible with me, and I just randomly opened it, and it's a passage where Jesus calls the children to him, right? And I felt like that was about as clear a sign as I could get in that moment. And I really tried hard to not listen.
Yeah.
And went home, kind of told my wife about it, and she was like, well, it kind of seems like this is maybe what you're supposed to do. So I went back in and talked to the principal and let her know that I would accept that position. So spent the next year then, getting ready to teach and learning how to be a teacher.
Yeah.
Went back to school that first year and got my teaching certificate. So then kind of dove into education.
Like right into the deep end.
Yeah.
Right I mean, you'd been working in it, but it's probably different when you're the one planning the lessons, facilitating the kids. And
it totally is.
Yeah.
And I remember standing there the first day looking out at all these, expectant faces, and I'm supposed to be the expert and know what to do. And I will forever remember looking at all of them and being like, hey, any of you guys been in fifth grade before? And they're obviously...
What are you talking about?
No, this is our first day. I was like, great, this is my first day as the teacher of fifth grade, so we're going to figure this out together.
Yeah.
Really incredible opportunity. I actually just got a text message from one of my students that was in that class. She starts her first day teaching tomorrow.
Oh, wow.
And was talking to me
exciting.
about, she still remembers that day too and how we figured it out together and now she gets to do that with a classroom.
Well, teachers are I think teachers and coaches are like so memorable, and you hope for good reason, sometimes not, but like for young students, like I look back at like high school, middle school teachers, coaches I've had like all the time as in the work I do now. I'm like, oh, that I remember that one moment. This is like reminding me of that. Yeah. They
have a really incredible ability to inspire students.
And motivate and just help kids with confidence, I think, in this world, like where they maybe don't have it, that they can have someone to believe in them.
For sure. It's a huge responsibility too. And I think the best teachers are the ones that really understand kind of that role, right?
Yeah.
That it's about more than just the academic piece. It's about those relationships that you can build, what you can help the student bring out of themselves.
Right. We just had Dan Hargrove. He was the director of aviation at Rocky, and so has a huge passion for leadership and teaching. And he said something that I really like going to Rocky, I resonate with, but he's like, you'll forget what you've been taught, but you won't forget how to think. Yeah. And I think that that's so true, especially that good teachers instill in you of like, you might forget the lesson or the specific thing, but you're not going to forget how to think and how to use that in the real world and in your life.
Yeah, for sure.
So you're teaching 5th grade.
So-
How long did you do that?
So I taught for 3 years.
And was your wife at the same school?
She was not. So
Okay.
she was at a different school at that point, both at Catholic schools.
Yeah.
So that part's important because, that's kind of all we know.
Because you went to Catholic school.
Yep. And so teach for 3 years, and then we find out that she's pregnant with our first child. And both being in Catholic schools, we feel like somebody should probably do something to maybe bring some income in. Catholic schools are notorious for not paying super well. And so we had a good conversation about, all right, well, what are we looking at? And I began exploring an opportunity at a different school where I could make a little bit more money. Was offered that job, went in, I had the same principal and told her that I was leaving to go do this job. And she asked me if I'd ever thought about administration.
Funny that this woman seems to be like quite a figure.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah, in your life.
It's like, absolutely not. I didn't think about teaching. I certainly
here I am.
haven't thought about administration.
Yeah.
She's like, well, you should consider it. Why don't you take this weekend? I think we have an opportunity for an assistant principal here.
And you had a master's degree, right?
I did, so I could
had
kind
all
of
these
slide
things.
right into it, right? So everything had prepared me kind of for that moment. And thought about it for a weekend, went in, and she offered me the exact same salary that I would have gotten at the other school. Like,
wow.
she didn't know what that salary was. So it was one of those, again, kind of those divine things, right? Where how do you come up with that number? And so I began as an assistant principal, started taking additional classes in educational leadership, pursuing an actual degree. If you can see the pattern here, right? Like I get interested in something and then I immediately go back to school for it.
Learn more, then come back.
So I've spent a ton of time in school too. I think I kind of have a school addiction, right?
Like to learn.
Yeah, big time.
And
So-
what's it like to be an assistant principal?
I think
Because
that's,
I grew up in a tiny town and those didn't exist.
Yeah. For me, I think I look back at that as one of the best jobs that I've had because you get little pieces of everything, right? You're still in the classroom. You're still working with kids. You're covering for teachers when they're gone often, but then you're planning the professional development. You're
for the
looking
teachers?
For teachers. You're looking at evaluations. You're trying to build kind of, you're a part of building culture. You're a part of hiring. So you get all of these pieces, but without, you're the guy, right? I always had somebody where I could be, that's above my pay grade and you got to go talk to him. And so had a couple years doing that. And during those years was encouraged by that same principal to go look at being a principal myself. So got involved in a different class through the Archdiocese of Denver that was a principal leadership preparation program.
Because you have to have that usually, right? Like there's like the education, but more of like a master's leadership type thing to be a principal, right? Isn't that?
Yeah, technically.
Rocky has a program that I know of because I had classmates that went to it.
Yeah. Rocky's program is really good. I actually did parts of their program last year because, again, the school addiction, right? Continuing with that. But yeah, you need a master's in educational leadership or an administrator's certificate, something like that. So went back and was at a program through University of Northern Colorado, and then also this program through the Archdiocese of Denver. And throughout this time, the school counselor had offered me, had handed me this bulletin from a local parish that was saying they were hiring for a principal. It's like, no, I'm not ready for that yet. Like it's October, I can't think about that. Well, in December, my wife's family went to mass there, and they brought back a bulletin. It still had the announcement in it. Like, no, thank you. I appreciate it, but not yet.
Yeah, because you were still just you were the assistant principal, right?
Still just an assistant principal.
Not just, but yeah.
No, very much just. I think all roles in education, right? It's just because it's a team effort, right? Like I think, we can talk about that in a bit, but so was handed another bulletin. By April, the associate superintendent was saying, I need you to apply for this job. It's the same one that people had been handing me bulletins for all year. And so I went out to look at this school, brand new school, but it was in a little bit of dire straits. They'd been open for 4 years, didn't have great enrollment.
And was it K through?
Yeah, it was K through 8 at that point. They were starting a preschool. I really don't know anything about preschool at this point in my life or how to open a preschool program. A brand new principal, have not like zero experience, and they clearly need somebody that knows what they're doing, which, is not me. And I go to the first interview, and when I leave that interview, I get a call from the associate superintendent that says, as soon as I walked out, the pastor popped champagne and said, "We found our principal."
Oh, wow.
Invited me back for the next interview, and then the next year I was there.
I enjoy the pop of champagne.
I know,
But
right?
I'm like, okay, I respect it.
Yeah, for sure. You got to celebrate those moments, right?
Absolutely.
Like when you have those big moments in life.
And when you find the good people, you have to celebrate it. Yeah.
So next year I was there, and I was at that job for about 5 years.
What was that like, growing in that, not having done it? You're in this new school. Like, what were some of those big things that you learned, that you accomplished?
I mean, I think it was a lot like standing in front of a room full of fifth graders when they're looking at you like you're supposed to be the person. You're supposed to know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've always tried to be pretty transparent with, I've got a limited skill set. And I think I do a couple things really well. And one of those things is listen.
Mm-hmm. Which is a great skill set for a leader.
I think it should be required, right? Like you have to be able to hear people. And I use hear intentionally there, right? Because like it's one thing to listen to somebody. It's another thing to really hear what they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think I can help build teams, right? I think that's one thing that I can do. And so it was really leaning into that team aspect. You guys are the ones that are in the classrooms. You're the ones that are seeing these kids every day. You're the ones that know how we as a group can get better. My job is to help you get better. And I need you to talk to me. And we've got to make some of these decisions collaboratively.
Mm-hmm.
There are times, right? COVID hit in the middle of that. And so there are times where you have to be the guy and make the call.
Yep. But I think it's good to know when to lean into the team, and because they are the ones, they're the day-to-day, like they're on the ground, they're working with students or whoever in whatever industry. But sometimes you have to make it during COVID situations, like knowing when to lean into the team or when you have to make the hard call. I think is a skill set that is sometimes, I just think it's a great skill set to have. Yeah,
I think it's hard to figure out those moments too, right? So I think
because you learn in doing it. It's like it's thrown at you. It's not like someone's like textbook telling you, okay, this is what you do when this happens. It's like, no, I guess I'm just gonna figure it out as I go.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there's an element to like, we are going to figure this out as we go. And so it means apologize. Like when you goof, like own your goof, own your mistake, right? And I think there's a lot to be said about the vulnerability that is expressed in that and saying like, look, I made a mistake. Like that was probably not the way to go.
Learn from it. Won't do it again.
Yeah.
Acknowledge it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it was a really interesting ride. I really leaned on a couple people that were really key, that you could bounce ideas off of, that we could, they would challenge my thinking. I'm also the type of person that likes to kind of sit back and ask questions. Apparently I don't hide the question. My face reveals that I'm going to ask questions, which a lot of teachers don't love most of the time. Like, what is wrong with your face, right? Like
I see it coming. Yeah.
But I think it's because a lot of times when people come to a leader, right, to talk something out, they already know what they want you to say. And I think if we can start from there, it allows us to have a better conversation. So I like to try and dig in. What's the real reason that we're having this conversation, whether it's about academic growth or performance or trouble with a colleague, right? If it's a parent that's frustrated about a teacher or things like that.
How do you deal with some of those? So knowing like you were in that during COVID, which was a really hard time, I would assume, to be in every industry, but education too, because your kids are at home learning. Like, what were some of those examples or things that you learned along the way of dealing with the conflict of the external party and or internal staff member? Yeah.
I mean, I think the biggest thing is you have to have your set of principles, right? And your set of key beliefs. Why do you do what you do every day? And what are those non-negotiables that you have? For us during COVID, right, it was challenging because the health department's giving you all these different rules. There's different hoops that you have to jump through, right? Whether it's the masking or the other things, right?
Social distancing.
Yeah. The big thing was I believed that being together as a community and being in person was our number one goal. that was beneficial for kids. They needed to be in a classroom with peers, and they needed to be there with teachers.
Mm-hmm.
And so we needed to do what we needed to do to keep our doors open. And if that meant we were going to move the desks apart, great, let's slide the desks, because we still get to be together.
Mm-hmm.
If that means we're putting on masks, okay, we're putting on masks. Because that allows us to be here. It allowed us to accomplish the main priority. And some folks really didn't agree with that, right? Some folks thought we should take stronger stances against things or do more to be out of school and do the distance learning piece.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was really what am I called to do right now, and what is most important? And then you make decisions with that in mind. And I think you do the same thing with if a parent is frustrated, right? Like, what are the most important things? What do you really believe? And what do you hold dear, right? Like if you have those set of principles, that guiding philosophy, it becomes really easy. You build your own framework to run decisions through.
Right.
And decisions become that much easier.
I really like that. So you talked a little bit about when you took that job, it was kind of like it was a vacant position, new facility, and it was not maybe as successful as they had hoped it to be. So what did you do? Because I know that when you left, it was. So do you want to talk about some of those things you did?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing was identify those key folks that are on your team, and then you build the team around them. And it's really kind of set that clear tone. For us, it was we're going to be the best school, period, full stop, and we will be the best Catholic school. For us, the Catholic piece was really important. We had within a 5-mile radius of us, we had 15 different charter schools.
Oh, wow.
One was a Mandarin immersion school. We had a small airport there, and they did aviation stuff for
cool.
students as low as kindergarten.
Wow.
It's really, really hard to compete against a school that's got flight simulators.
Yeah.
So what was our defining characteristic? Well, it's that we're Catholic, right? I don't need the buzzwords. I don't need expeditionary learning. I don't need STEM, right? All of those things in front of it. I'm not going to be a STEM Catholic school. I can just be a Catholic school because there's a lot communicated in that word. And so we leaned into that and really pushed for academic excellence, high standards of growth for our students.
And was that in what kinds of programmings did you guys have that you really did lean into?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was just really leaning into strong core curriculum, right? So
English, math.
Yep.
Yeah.
So just our core subjects, English, math, reading, really prioritize reading. I think, I've got a belief that everything kind of stems from reading. If you can read, you can learn. And so we wanted to make sure that every kid was able to read and could then access content. Yep. Because if they could do that, right, it was a lot easier for us to teach the other skills that come after that. So really spent a lot of time, especially with our younger grade staff, focused on that, saw test scores improve from there. And then it was really just building this culture, right? Like we did a lot of things outside of work as a team. We would get together and go to baseball games. We would, teachers started organizing happy hours after school, which awesome, right? Love the happy hour stuff, love getting people together in those groups, because that translated to more people then hanging out, becoming friends, really enjoying coming to work. That atmosphere was really present then at work. Kids gravitate towards people that look like they're having fun, right?
When they're positive, doing good things.
When kids are happy, their parents are happy. Parents talk to other parents. More parents come. And so then we also had the academic results. We had the faith formation. We had athletic and extracurricular opportunities for students. And all of those things kind of blossomed into a pretty vibrant community, where eventually, people were saying, I used to know everybody that came to these events. Now I don't. I know half. I was like, well, I guess
that's a good thing.
I guess you got more people to meet then, right?
Exactly.
So kind of putting it back on parents too. Now it's your job to get to know other folks too, right? We've brought new people here, and we've got to welcome them in and build that community a little bit more.
So looking back, growing up, were there things that stood out to you? Like we were talking about a little bit, those things that you look back on now and you're like, oh, wow, that was helpful to my career then, because it sounds like it was natural for you to really see we do need a strong culture. We do need to just lean into this one identity for the school to really grow and be focused. And I think that did you have any of those moments where you look back, even in your schooling, that you're like, oh, that was really helpful to help me in that spot in my life?
Yeah, I think for me, at least, when I've felt most successful is when I've felt connected to somebody else. When you feel that connection,
self-awareness.
Yeah, I think it's self-awareness, but I think it's also we're communal beings, right? Like we're meant to be in community with one another. It's very you look at any of the studies, right? Like
Yeah.
mental health and mental illness is really prevalent amongst people that don't have strong social connections, right? Because we're not meant to be isolated. We're not meant to live alone.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the development of civilization, right? Like that's why we've kind of gravitated towards communities. That's why I think it's so neat what Big Sky Economic Development does, right? And and push community events and activities, right? Really try and build the Billings community as well. Because I think that's super important, bringing people together and getting us to live in harmony with one another, right? Not that we do a great job of that all the time, but we strive for it. And so throughout my life, whether it was on sports teams, whether it was in a class, whether it was in seminars in college, right? When you had those 2, 3, 4 other people and you were doing study sessions, they would push me to study harder. They would push me to work harder at soccer practice, right? They'd push me to run that little bit faster. They'd push me to try and get that grade up a little bit. So it was always about other people because I think other people make us better when they're the right people. So coming into a leadership position, you find the right people, and those other people make everybody else better, which then in turn, right, makes everybody better again. So it's this cyclical thing. So I think it's an attitude, right? And I really try and lead with that attitude top of mind.
I really like that.
Point out where I'm trying to grow, what my goals are, how I can do things better. And I encourage people to let me know, too. When I fall down, I was going to say if. It's not an if, right? It's a when. Like, tell me, right? Point it out. And then help me get back up and help me keep moving.
Figure it out. So what was your transition? So you were at the school. What was that transition? Where did you go? Was it to Billings next?
Yeah, so next was Billings.
And what was that? Tell our listeners about that transition. Because you're doing great things. You had a great culture, great community that you were building. And what was that calling for the next?
Yeah, when I took that job, I sat down with the pastor who was there, and I asked him what kind of his priorities were. Right, it was make it feel like a school, stabilize enrollment, right, grow and stabilize enrollment, and then get the budget in line. So I really had 3 priorities, and by the time I was year 5, those 3 things were there. I felt like those were pretty well in place. And so we looked at a couple other things to do, and I started leaning in and had all these ideas. But I got a LinkedIn notification, right? And LinkedIn for me is typically people trying to sell me things. Yep. So it's an auto delete, right? Like I almost always just delete it. And I had happened to glance at it, still deleted it. And then for some reason went back to it later that night and read it. And it was about this opening for a job up here in Billings.
And had you been to Montana before?
We had come to Montana the prior summer and done the Yellowstone trip, but came up from, Tetons, hit Yellowstone, stayed in West Yellowstone. So really not in Montana, beyond West Yellowstone during tourist season, which was awesome and a great thing, right? And like, I don't know anybody that could go there and not envision like, I'd love to live in Montana.
Yeah.
But at that point too, right, all of Montana was like West Yellowstone. I didn't realize there was a whole other side of the state that was more, Great Plains. And so got this notification, talked to my wife and was like, what do you think about Montana? She was like, I don't know.
Is she from Colorado?
She's from, born and raised in Colorado. And she was like, I think you should at least see what it's about, right? So I had emailed back, go through a couple different exchanges. Within 4 days, I'm interviewing virtually with the board. I'm flying up here the next Sunday and have an interview with the panels that they had set up over at St. Francis, tour of all the facilities. And it was kind of awesome because I didn't need to leave, right? Like it wasn't like I needed a job. It was, if this is right, it's going to fit and it'll happen. And there's so much freedom in that. So that was one of my favorite interview processes because it was, you just talk about you, right? I could talk about me. I'm an expert in very few things. I'm pretty good at me. And so I felt like I just got to be myself and be pretty genuine. Yeah, because
you don't, it's not like you need it. You had a great job, but like could be a new opportunity.
Yeah. And, I hear back a couple weeks later and they had offered me the job. So I figured my family should probably see Billings before we decided to move. And luckily we were on spring break, loaded everybody into the car and drove up, stayed at a hotel that had a water slide in it. So my kids immediately liked Billings because there was a pool and a water slide.
It's fun.
Yeah. Went to Shields and rode the Ferris wheel and did the zoo thing, and then met with some members of the board, Miss Hayes over at St. Francis. And she was gracious enough to come in on a day off and take us on a tour of the building. Had wonderful conversations with them, and it just felt right. At the same time, we're coming right off COVID, and my wife and I had made the decision not to discuss it really until we were on the drive home. And as we start leaving, we get right out of town on 90 there on the way back towards Denver, and she looks at me and she says, "So what do you think?" I said, I don't want to go. It was great. It was fun. But I just need 1 year where I'm not learning something new. Like I could use 1 year where I can just kind of rest. And our faith is incredibly important to us. As you can kind of see from the journey, right? Praying before all these decisions, and
little mentors along the way.
Yeah. And she looked at me and she said, "Well, you'll have to explain to God why you're not taking the job, because it's pretty clear that's where you're supposed to be." Okay, well,
yeah.
I don't really know how you're supposed to respond to that. And so I spent a lot of time looking back, right? I think, it felt like I was at a starting line, right? And I think a starting line is often more about everything that came before it than what comes next.
Like what got you to this point?
All
be at
the
the
work
line,
brought you to this moment, right? And so how did I arrive here? And I see God pulling me along, right? And I'm not always the best listener, right? Like I didn't want to teach fifth grade, and God kind of put that there, right? I didn't want to go into administration, and this incredible influence in my life said, you need to do this, and God made it line up. I didn't want to be a principal, and it felt like at every turn somebody was pushing me right in that direction. And then I didn't want to move, and randomly this LinkedIn notification that I never pay attention to, I look at,
delete,
I'm
look at again,
right? Like, and then you have this moment, and it's like, well, I think this is where we're supposed to be. And the beautiful thing for me as a leader in that moment, and then coming up here, is there's a huge sense of freedom in that, because it's about more than me. It's not just me. If I believe, if I have this faith, right, that God is guiding me and has me on a journey, then I have to just respond to what I believe he's leading me into. I have to do what I do, and I have to use the knowledge, the skills that I possess to the best of my ability. But it's about more than me. And there's an unbelievable sense of freedom in, I just have to show up and I just have to do the work.
So after she said that, like in the 8-hour drive you had back to Denver, or however long it was, like 8-9 hours, with kids and stops and stuff, was it like, did you know, or did you?
Yeah, I knew.
Yeah.
I mean, I think as soon as she said it, I knew we were going to go. Honestly, if I'm really, really honest, I think I knew when I was at the airport, after they dropped me off after the interview day. I called her and I said, I think we're going to get the chance to move here. And I just really tried to not think about it, and tried to ignore it even on the drive home, right? Like, I'll talk to my mom, I'll talk to my family tomorrow. We'll, let's get some distance first, and then we can make the decision. But no, I mean,
it's a big decision to move.
Yeah, it was huge. All of our families in Denver. My kids at that point were 4 and 5.
So not quite, maybe kindergarten, but
yeah. So we're relocating at a time when we could really use family around to help watch them. They'd never had a babysitter before we came up here. Didn't know what that was like, right? And now they've had them quite a few times. But we also looked at Billings and the opportunities that it would provide for our family and for our kids. Billings reminds me a lot of the childhood that I had in Denver, the one that I remember, right? Where you can go outside. The outdoors are embraced and loved. The yards aren't postage stamps all the time. Like my kids have some space to run. They can bike. They can do these things where you couldn't really do that in Denver anymore. Everything is so crowded. There's so many people, right? The houses are tiny. Well, the houses are huge, so the yards are no good, right? Cost of living was exorbitant. Homelessness issues, which I know Billings has those issues too.
Everybody does, yeah.
But it was just, it was a place where we could really focus on us and be a family. And it was this incredible opportunity with an unbelievable school system that has this tremendous legacy of success, this huge tradition, and a deep held commitment to Catholic education. So to be able to come up here and be a part of that, I got to meet with some of the folks on the team. I think every once in a while in life you get those opportunities where you see a team and you're like, I want to do that. I want to be a part of that.
Part of that team.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that happened for you. So how long now? So that was like what, 2021? And you or
2022.
2022.
Yep, so going into my third year up here.
And how's it been? Like, what do you talk about it? But I think for those that maybe aren't as familiar with maybe Billings or just Catholic school systems in general, just like what is it like?
Yeah. So our system as a whole, I think we have a really unique opportunity.
Because you're president of the system.
Right. Yeah. So we have the ECE, so St. Francis ECE.
What's ECE stand for?
Early Childhood Education. Okay. So we've got a daycare and a pre-kindergarten there.
Yep.
And then you move into kindergarten through 8th grade at St. Francis, and then 9th through 12th at Billings Central Catholic High School. And
St. Francis was a big project because it used to not be on Colton. And that was really a big project a little bit before you came to Billings. But I would be also curious of like, what's that been like now to have? Because you probably have learned from the team and others just in the community of now having that addition where you have K through 8.
So that was 2017 that building was finalized and opened. And one of the difficulties, right, is they really consolidated 3 different buildings into one, right? So that's 3 different kind of leadership styles. It's 3 different cultures. It's 3 different levels of kids, right? So they all have their individual kind of flavor.
Yeah.
And I think what's been neat is over the past several years, right, both Jim Stanton, who's our 5 through 8 principal, and Deb Hayes, who's the kindergarten through 4 principal, have spent a lot of time thinking about how do we merge these cultures, right? How do we get kindergarten through 8th grade students to all interact and embrace one another, and how do we lead, through kind of that transition, and then build the new culture out of that. They've leaned really heavily on some great teachers to foster those cross grade level connections.
Yeah.
So they do a lot of activities with kindergartners through 8th graders. So you mix up all the grade levels, bring them all together. So you've got kind of that opportunity for mentoring. The younger kids look up to the older kids. Oh, it's huge.
And they're not scary because they're like helping them.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so then you can see the younger students, saying hi to the older students when they pass each other in the halls. The older students understand that they've got an opportunity to be mentors, but also be role models, right? They people are watching, right? And so how you behave impacts how some of these kids are going to think.
And they were little ones too.
For sure.
And then they'll be freshmen.
Yep.
And then they'll be the little ones or the young ones. And then they'll be seniors, So I think it's like a nice cycle.
Yeah. And so I think system-wide, we have this really unique opportunity to have students with us from the time they're 3 years old, right, till they're 18 and heading out to college.
A lot of responsibility in a good way.
A ton. The beautiful thing is Catholic schools, the way that we're positioned, right, and what we know about education from the church is that we're in partnership with parents, right? So parents are primary educators of their kids. Our job is to partner with those parents. Now, we're going to be experts in certain areas, right? So we ask parents to lean on us for certain things, but we also respect the role that a parent has in their student's life and really try and encourage parents to get involved, to be active. We listen to them, right? Like, what's going on with your student?
Yeah.
Build those relationships. Again, for me, everything comes back to that relationship and that community, which is huge at BCS, right? Billings Catholic Schools. When you think about our mission statement, right, it's faith, family, spirit, academic excellence. So that community, that family spirit is a tenet of what we preach and what we try to achieve every day with our kids.
Yeah, and I think you feel that. I remember I had a few cousins that graduated, but I was quite a bit younger. And then Austin's cousin graduated when I was an adult, because he's closer in age, still like a little baby. But even at graduation, I was like, oh my gosh, this is because I went to a small town, so public school.
Yeah.
And they did like this little like circle stompy kind of thing that was like cute, but like definitely like community feeling, like where they all just are super close with each other.
Yeah.
Which was kind of fun to see.
Yeah, I think they do a really good job of acknowledging moments of transition, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
and they're big. We're celebrating it and making special.
Yeah. These are pivotal moments for us, right? Pivotal moments for these young people that we're sending out into the world, especially at graduation, right? But even when you think about completing kindergarten or success at music performances, things like that, I think we try to be really intentional about celebrating those moments with students and giving them opportunities to showcase their talents, their abilities, who they are. That's one of the things I think that's really unique, and that family spirit piece. Like when you think about the high school, 85% of our students are involved in an MHSA sanctioned activity. So that's not only time that they're spending together in class, but time that they're together in practices, on the field, in competition. When you have that level of community, right, it's naturally going to translate into those positive connections with other people.
Yeah.
And so I think that's part of that like special ingredient. Shel Hanser, former principal at Central, used to call it the special sauce, right? Which is just awesome. I think he's spot on when he would talk about things like that.
And so you've been there now a few years, coming up on year 3. Like, what have been some of your focus areas, knowing that you came from a system and you got it really put on the right track? What have been your focus areas while you've been here so far?
Yeah, I think year 1 was really kind of the learning year, right? Like you always want to come into a place and especially a place that has as storied a history, a legacy as Billings Catholic Schools. You want to understand the importance of the system to the community. You want to understand what has made that such a special place. What are those traditions? What is it that people really hold dear? And so over the course of year 1, it was really trying to understand the culture, understand the system. But we also took time to work with over 65 different stakeholders to put together a strategic plan. And so we have a 5-year kind of plan and vision for where the schools should be. That's available on the website if anybody wants to take a look at it. And then last year was really our mission year. So we dove into the mission. Everything that we do should filter through that, right? That's, I think, one of the signs of a successful organization is when they're really guided and mission focused. We have a phenomenal mission, right? Provide exceptional Catholic education with formation in faith, family, spirit, academic excellence. Mm-hmm. So there's key words there, right? Like faith, family, spirit, academic excellence, but exceptional Catholic education. Right? Mm-hmm. Those are the things that we really need to define and then live. So last year was focused on the faith, defining the characteristics that are in that mission statement and then living out that mission. And this year we're really digging into excellence. So looking at curriculum reviews, we've got more time. We kind of redid the schedules to allow for more time for teachers to engage with one another, for cross-curricular collaboration, small group work, so that they could really kind of hone in, their lessons, really take a look at some of our student data to make sure that we're meeting each individual student's needs. So all those different things are kind of high priority for us this year, making sure that we're really delivering on what we promise in that mission statement.
And I love the filter through mission. I think that's so important. So knowing that you talked a little bit about it, but what is that like for retention of teachers in a Catholic school system and staff, like keeping that culture really positive and, like exciting where they're collaborating and they're happy and positive, and that then translates to the students.
Yeah. I think retention is huge. Teaching is also one of those professions where, it's hard. You look at kind of average retention rates, right? We're losing a lot of teachers generally as a profession by year 3. If a teacher makes it to year 7, that's typically their make or break year, right? Like if they make it through year 7, they're going to stick around. If they're gone before year 7, they're done. They probably won't come back to the profession. So that's one thing that just generally impacts education. For us as a Catholic school, I think we see most of the time better retention rates than that. It's different too, right? I think Catholic education is fundamentally different than just teaching as a career. it's still hard, but there's a different reason for being there because we're tied up in faith and we're tied up in this worldview. We have the benefit of sharing a particular view of the world and a particular understanding of education that isn't always present when it's not a Catholic school, right? So everybody kind of comes to the table already on that page of the handout, right? We kind of get the advantage of building from a foundation that already exists rather than having to just lay that foundation. So by relying on those things, by creating opportunities for teachers to collaborate, I think those things help retention. I think it's also then just being really invested in who they are and their growth, right? What is going to make you enjoy this job more?
What's going to keep you here to stay?
Can we always do that? No. And sometimes
I don't think any organization can do everything.
Yeah. Sometimes that's where, that's one of those decisions that I have to make on my own. But when you give people the opportunity to have buy-in, to be a participant in the decision-making process, whether it's through leadership teams at the local building level or in system-wide teams where we're looking at specific aspects of our program, I think you get more buy-in and more investment from the people that are actually carrying out the work. So that's been a huge focus for us is making sure that our board is really focused on strategic priorities. They then pass those strategic priorities to our administrative team, who then take that to the teachers and say, okay, this is the strategy. This is what we need to get done. How we do it, let's figure that out together.
Yeah.
So how are we going to do that as a group? And when you can do it that way, I think teachers have more of the buy-in, right? In any organization, right? Like the people then that are responsible for carrying out the work, when they can devise how something gets done.
Because they probably know. They know, like, what the weaknesses are, or like what things aren't working well, what things are working well, because they know the students, like they're the ones in the day in and day out of it.
Yep.
Yeah. I remember my little cousin, she is in the St. Francis building, and she was so thrilled one year she had a teacher that Austin had.
Yeah.
And so she was like, Austin, I have your teacher.
Yeah.
So it's just like that longevity of, I think the alumni are super proud and still super connected with their teachers, even like decades later after grad, if they're still there.
Yeah.
That they still talk about very fondly.
It's really impressive how many folks we've had that have dedicated entire careers to teaching for Billings Catholic Schools. I mean, last year, Miss Michelle Maddox retired after 40 years of teaching for our system. Absolutely phenomenal educator, and is still super involved. I got an email from her the other day. So really glad that she is still, offering her expertise and sharing that with the system too. I think that's one of those things that's a little bit different, right? Billings Catholic Schools it gets in there, and once you get it, you want to be a part of it.
And just to clarify for those listening, to go, you don't have to be Catholic, right?
That is true. School. Yep, you do not have to be Catholic.
It's a Catholic-based school, but you don't have to be Catholic to attend as a student.
Yeah, we're about 60% Catholic, so 40% of our students are not Catholic. I think a lot of families that are looking for alternatives, right, that just want maybe something different than the local neighborhood school, they'll come and have those conversations with us and then potentially enroll students there too. So, and
I love the family focus. I even think in SD2, Dr. Garcia talks a lot about that too, just the strength and importance of family.
Yep.
For those students in those formative years as they're growing and reading and really learning, and having that strong family foundation and support system. So I think the Catholic Schools does a very good job of that.
Yeah, I know he was very gung-ho with that when he got up here, and that message is maintained, which I think is awesome. It's great to see, just educationally, us focus on parents. I think parents are such tremendous influences on their students. And I think we as schools, as educators, have an obligation to work with parents and make sure that they've got the tools that they need. Because being a parent's hard too. Right?
Yeah, I don't have children, but it seems hard.
Yeah, it's a little tricky. Now my son is 9, my daughter's 7. And we're fully involved in all the different community activities too, right? Whether it's soccer, gymnastics, Boy Scouts, all those things.
T-ball.
Yeah, it really does take a community to keep them, invested, active, and watch over them. So really blessed and fortunate that we're a part of our Catholic school community, and then all those those micro communities within Billings as well.
No, totally. And I think Billings is lucky to have both you and Dr. Garcia newer into our community, but you bring such vast experience and knowledge from different systems that I think have been really great for our Billings community to really strengthen our education system and just keep it strong and moving forward. It's been so great to have you on, and we like to end each episode with a few rapid fire. We call them rapid fire. They're not overly rapid fire questions, but before we do that, we'll hear a quick message from our sponsor. Thank you to Big Sky Economic Development for supporting the Vault at 201 North Broadway. Big Sky Economic Development is the community's economic development organization. BSED's mission is to sustain and grow our region's vibrant economy and outstanding quality of life by providing leadership and resources for business creation, expansion, retention, new business recruitment, workforce development, and community development. Learn more and connect with BSED at bigskyeconomicdevelopment.org. Okay, so my first rapid fire question for you, and you touched a little bit on it, so I'm excited to elaborate more, but what are some of your non-negotiables in work and life?
Families first. I think for me, it starts there. If I'm not a good part of my family, I'm going to be kind of miserable at work. I think another is keep first things first, right? So what are the top priorities, right? And make sure that you've got those properly ordered in your head. And then other things can kind of fall behind that. So whether that's your to-do list, your task list, checking emails, any of those things, right? Like first things first, get that done, and then you can move to the rest. I mean, I think those, in terms of a rapid fire answer, I think that's
those
what
are good. And they're like rapid-ish. There's just three, but we can elaborate. So, okay, my next one is, and I'm excited to hear what this is for you. What is some of the best advice you've ever received?
Failure is definitely an option. And it's not the worst thing. Right? You can come back when you fail, right? I think failure is a part of growth. It's not something to necessarily be scared of. For me, being stagnant is a thing to be wary of. And so if you're trying and you have the best intentions, right, you are properly ordered, I think sometimes failure is inevitable, right? And it allows you to grow. That's how you respond to that. Another one that really sticks out is sometimes the easy thing makes everything else harder. Sometimes the hard thing makes everything else easier. Right. So
I really like both of those. I resonate a lot with those.
Yeah. To me, that's been a pretty big one the past couple years. Right.
Yeah.
Hard things are hard to do. Right. But when you can do the hard thing, a lot of the other stuff falls in line. And sometimes those easy things, right? Like it's easy to, skip working out for a day, but then you completely forget to do those things. For me, I was training for a marathon this last year.
Okay, that's awesome.
And so it was really easy. It felt easy some days to wake up and not go on that run because I just really didn't want to. I was tired, right? But it made the next one that much more difficult.
Right. I think that's a good analogy too.
Yeah. So, and I think it's I think I heard it about running, but it applies to so much more than running.
Yeah. And I think that I like that a lot. I like both of those a lot. I think it's how you react to failure. Like you're probably gonna, but don't let it, like you got to pick it up and move on and learn from it. But also you have to build a strong foundation, and that's hard. I think in whatever you're working on, if it's building a new team, if it's coming into something new, you have to build that strong foundation. That's not necessarily easy, especially when you're involving others and it's not just you. But in the end, it's so worth it. And it's going to make a lot of other things to build and grow upon much easier. So I really like that. So knowing that you've been in Billings now 3-ish years, what are some of your favorite things to do in Billings?
I love Saturday soccer days, right?
Oh, fun, yeah.
So those are super fun, like down at Amon Park. It was great. I'd have days where I'd run over and watch my daughter play and then run and watch my son play and then back to my daughter's game. All the clubs here have a lot of tournaments down there too. So that's super fun to just see kind of the community come out and be a part of it. Alive at 5 is awesome. Yeah. So the fact that we've got those community events where people can go out and just kind of gather, I think awesome. I love running. The fact that we have this trail at the top of the rims now, the Skyline Trail, right? Like, what a beautiful thing. There's some absolutely gorgeous views up there. And then just kind of picking routes around the city too. I think there's a lot of hidden trails that like you can Google and you can't really find them. But if you just get out there, I think there's a ton to do. We recently got into pickleball. So
fun. I haven't tried it yet, but
super fun. I love that my kids can play on one court and then my wife and I can play on another one and kind of rotate back and forth.
Yeah.
Bike rides, just being active, being outside.
Fun. I like those. Have you been to 4 dances yet?
I have not.
You should. So that one's stunning in the morning.
Okay.
You actually view the river and then you see the refineries, but you really see the city. It's opposite of the rim. So it's a little bit southeast of town.
Okay.
I give directions and weird. I'm bad at left and right. So Austin's like, you give it like you're out in the middle of a field. And I'm like, anyways, it's really pretty. So if you're looking for something, it's like a really pretty, easy to get to point.
Awesome.
That's really pretty. So Andrew, it's been so great to have you. Where can people connect with you, learn more about the school system, website, social, all of that?
Yeah, I think the best place is really our website. So BillingsCatholicSchools.org. You'll see my contact information, lots of information about the schools, strategic plan, annual reports, and get to know a little bit about us and our history and what we bring the community to.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And thanks for all you do for the community. It's been awesome to have you on.
Thank you so much. It's been great to be here.
We hope you enjoyed this episode.
Make sure you are subscribed to The Vault at 201 North Broadway, wherever you podcast, including YouTube.
Connect with us on Facebook at The Vault at 201 North Broadway and Instagram at The Vault_201.
Don't forget to visit us at thevault@201.com and subscribe to our newsletter.
We will see you next time.
Bye.